So what really happened to actor Matthew Perry, and why is this doctor facing over 100 years in prison? Well, it all starts with this kid, Matthew. And Matthew's a teenager during this time, living in Canada, and bro has a problem. He doesn't feel like he's good enough, like he's an outsider who will never be loved, and this is an overwhelming feeling for him. But one day, when he's a little older, he discovers something that makes that feeling go away. Alcohol. And so Matthew starts drinking regularly. And as time goes on, he starts to grow dependent on alcohol. But it's okay that he's drinking right now because he has a long-term plan. He's going to become a famous actor one day, and fame will make him stop feeling like he's not good enough. And so he moves to Los Angeles, and he starts going on auditions. And he gets some stuff. But then, in 1994, when he's 24 years old, he's cast as Chandler on the sitcom Friends. And Matthew nails this role. He improvises some of the best lines in the show.
You have to stop the Q-tip when there's resistance.
And as you already know, this show is not only a hit, it becomes the biggest show on the planet. So of course, Matthew blows up. And all of a sudden, he's a huge celebrity now, and people all over the world love him. In fact, this show is so successful, the whole cast goes on to become some of the highest paid actors of all time, making over $1 million a week. However, even though Matthew has finally achieved everything he wanted, all this fame and money doesn't do what he thought it would do, and he still feels like he isn't good enough. And so he keeps drinking every night, and he does painkillers, and sometimes he does harder drugs, and his addiction starts to get really bad. In fact, it gets so bad, he films entire seasons of Friends without even remembering filming them. And then, one day, his co-star, Jennifer Aniston, comes into his dressing room, and she tells him straight up, "Matthew, I can smell the alcohol on you. I think you need help." And there, he learns that the whole cast is worried about him. And so he starts going to rehab, and he attends rehab several times throughout the filming of the series. But even with all that going on, somehow bro is able to make it through all 10 seasons, and the show is still a giant success when it ends in 2004. And nearly 20 years go by, and it's 2023, and Matthew is 54 now, and he's still battling with his addiction. And at this point, Matthew's gone to rehab 15 times, he's done weekly therapy, he's attended over 6,000 AA meetings, he's spent over $7 million trying to get clean, but somehow it keeps coming back along with that horrible feeling that he's not good enough. But then, one day, he gets a little hope. Matthew goes to a doctor to get help with depression and anxiety, and the doctor treats him with a different kind of drug. Ketamine. And surprisingly, this actually works. Matthew starts to get a bit of relief from this awful feeling that he's been having for so long. But here's the thing about ketamine though. It can be a dangerous drug, so when it's prescribed, you're supposed to only have a limited amount of it, and you're supposed to use it with a doctor in a clinic so that they can monitor your vitals and make sure that, you don't die. And so Matthew, of course, he does it this way. But ketamine only lasts a couple of hours, and he wants to feel it all the time. And so he's got to up the dose and take more every day, multiple times a day. And that is when he meets this guy, who we'll call Dr. P. Dr. P is a local physician, and when he meets Matthew, the famous former Friends star, he immediately sees dollar signs. And Dr. P, he has no experience with ketamine therapy treatments, nor does he have any legitimate medical purpose to give ketamine to Matthew. But he doesn't care. He wants to get paid, allegedly. And so he comes up with a plan to be Matthew's plug, his go-to doctor for ketamine. But Dr. P, he can't get the amount of ketamine he needs, so he enlists another physician to help him get it. This guy, Dr. Chavez. And so Dr. P allegedly goes to Dr. Chavez and he's like, "Hey, want to take advantage of a rich TV star's drug addiction?" And Dr. Chavez hears this and he's like, "All right." And so Dr. Chavez starts writing fraudulent prescriptions, and by doing this, he's able to get ketamine for Dr. P. And they start texting each other back and forth about how much they're gonna charge Matthew. And Dr. P's exact words in his text, he says, "I wonder how much this moron will pay. Let's find out." And that is a direct quote from Matthew Perry's doctor talking about his own patient. Now, for context, a vial of ketamine cost them around $12. Dr. P charges Matthew $2,000. That is a hell of a markup. And so you can see how pretty quickly Dr. P is allegedly making bank off of Matthew's addiction. And so he wants to keep going. Now, obviously, he's a practicing physician. He doesn't have the schedule to be hanging around Matthew all the time to monitor him while he's on these drugs. And so he teaches this guy to help, Kenny. And Kenny is Matthew's personal live-in assistant. And Dr. P shows Kenny how to inject Matthew so that he can get the high he wants, even though Kenny is just a personal assistant. He has absolutely no medical training. And so now Matthew is getting these injections at home every day without medical supervision. And one day, as you probably could have predicted, it all goes wrong. Because Matthew is at home, he's chilling in his hot tub, and his hot tub seems to be in his backyard, so it overlooks a nice view. And this is his favorite spot to chill. And this picture is a little dark, but you can see him here. And here, he gets Kenny to inject him with a big shot of ketamine. Then, Kenny leaves. He leaves to go run some errands, and Matthew is there all alone. And at some point, Matthew is so high that he, unfortunately, overdoses, and he slowly slips into the water.
Tributes are being paid this morning to the Friends actor Matthew Perry, who has died at the age of 54.
So of course, this is big news, and it blows up, and people are understandably devastated. I mean, he was a huge star in the 90s, and to this day, Friends is still very popular on streaming. And Dr. P, he hears about this news, and he's probably like, oh, because he realizes that he's Matthew's doctor, so they're definitely going to blame him. And then, allegedly, he starts falsifying documents. Like, he writes a fake treatment plan for Matthew, and he starts claiming that he gave him much lower doses of ketamine than he actually did. However, the feds, they aren't stupid. Pretty quickly, they figure out that these documents are bullshit, meant to influence their investigation, and so, bam, they arrest him. Here's what he looks like in real life. And also, bam, they arrest Dr. Chavez, and they end up arresting Kenny too. And they also arrested 2 other drug dealers connected to his death. Meanwhile, Dr. P is currently out on bail, and he's awaiting his trial, and he's facing over 100 years in prison for his role in this. However, that hasn't stopped him from practicing medicine, because bro is apparently still a practicing physician, and according to health grades, he's currently accepting new patients. Oh, and by the way, they haven't actually been to trial yet, so all of this is alleged. So this guy, you know what? You're gonna think I made this story up, because it is wild. Now the story is about this guy, James. And James is 35, living in a small town in West Virginia, and he's kind of an awful guy. Like, he drinks a lot, he abuses his wife. But one night in 1983, James gets what's coming to him. Because it's late, and he comes home from the bar drunk, and he decides his wife needs to make him a snack. His wife is this woman, Cleo, and Cleo's 35. And so he yanks Cleo out of the bed because it's the middle of the night and she's asleep, and he's yelling at her, "Make me some food!" And so she makes him some soup. But then he gets mad that the soup is too cold, and grrr, he slings the bowl across the kitchen and bam, it smashes against the wall. Then he notices their wood stove had gone out, so he's all pissed off about that too. And this causes a whole big fight, and he's like roughing up Cleo, and he's chasing her around, and he's dragging her. It is awful. Now by this point, all this wakes up Cleo's son. We'll call him 17, because he's 17. And 17 is James's stepson. And I guess 17 tries to intervene, and this turns into an even bigger fight. And so James ends up roughing him up too. And pretty quickly, James has Cleo and her 3 sons sitting at the kitchen table, and he's berating them, all while holding a huge kitchen knife and shaking it at them. Then he grabs a .22, and he starts waving it around, screaming at them. Now, all this screaming wakes up this woman, Cleo's mom, who we'll call Grandma. and Grandma is 55 and she lives next door. And so she wakes up and she runs over and she sees James waving the .22 around, and she eventually tries to grab it from him and a struggle ensues. But Grandma, she ain't playing around, and she wrestles the .22 away from his drunk ass, and he lunges at her to get it back, and then blam, she shoots him right in the chest. So now James is lying there unalived. And Cleo is like, well, now what are we gonna do? I guess they don't want Grandma to go to prison for murder. And so they decide to bury the body in the backyard. And for some reason, they make 17 and his younger brother do it. And so 17 and his younger brother are in the backyard digging this big-ass hole, and eventually the hole is big enough and they put James in there and they bury him. But now they have another problem. James's truck is there and they need to get rid of it. And so they put their heads together and they come up with a plan to drive the truck down to the local river and push it into the water and make it look like James got into a car accident. Now, I don't know how they're going to stage a car accident while James's body is buried in the backyard, but this is their plan. And so Cleo and Grandma and 17, they head over to the river and they take James's truck and they take their car to drive back home in. And so the two vehicles drive about 30 miles to the river and they park James's truck on a hill, and 17 gets out and he starts pushing it toward the water until it starts rolling forward. And it rolls and it rolls and it gets close to the shore, but then bam, it stops because it gets stuck in the mud. So then Cleo and Grandma get out of the car. And I guess they're like standing there and they don't want to go up and physically push the truck anymore because it's now in the mud, and I guess they don't want their footprints all in that mud, which is smart. And so they're like, all right, I guess we'll just leave. But here's the thing. They locked their keys in their car. Now, why they locked their car door in the first place when they're alone out in the middle of nowhere, I have no idea. But now they're locked out. And it's 1983, so no cell phones. However, luckily, someone passes by, and it's a small town, and they all know each other, and so this person gives them a ride back to their house so they can get a spare key and retrieve their car and go home. Then, the next day, Cleo calls police and files a missing persons report for James so that she doesn't look suspicious. And immediately, the police start looking, and they find his truck, and they start dragging the river looking for James's body. But, of course, they don't find anything, and no one suspects Cleo or Grandma, so all they have to do is lay low and keep quiet, and they'll never get caught. Until a few days have passed since James's death, and no one suspects a thing. But Cleo is sitting at home suffering. She just can't get this whole situation out of her head. She keeps thinking about it. James might have been an abusive asshole, but she's feeling bad for his family, and she's thinking that if his body is never found, then he won't get a proper burial, and that just doesn't feel right to her. And so she comes up with a new plan. First, she waits until nighttime. Then she makes 17 and his brother dig James's body back up. And so her new plan is to take James's body to the local river and throw him over the bridge near the area where they dumped his truck, and then police will find the body and they'll put two and two together and they'll assume it was a car accident, and then he'll get a proper burial. Perfect plan. What could possibly go wrong? Well, once they finally get James out of the hole in the backyard, snap! Grandma starts freaking out because she realizes the .22 that she unalived him with is actually registered to her. She owns it. So if police find the bullet inside of James, they could trace it back to her. And so she gets yet another idea. She'll just remove the bullet from his body. And so they get James's decomposing body and they put it on the kitchen table, and Grandma gets a big kitchen knife and she cuts it open and she starts looking around in there for a bullet. But she can't find it. So then she takes out his heart and lungs, I guess to get a better look in there, but she still can't find this bullet. So then she just gives up and she throws the heart and lungs away. Like, oh, okay, I guess I'm done. And so anyway, Cleo, Grandma, and 17, they load James into the car and they drive him to the river onto that bridge. And then these two women and a teenager pull his body out of the car and they yeet him over the side of the bridge. And boom! James's foot gets caught on the structure of the bridge. And now the body is hanging upside down, dangling off the underside of this bridge. And they're all like, fuck, how are we gonna get him down? And so Cleo and Grandma, they send poor 17 to climb up under the bridge onto the understructure to try and knock James's body loose. But then, in the middle of all this, out of nowhere, pow, headlights appear. It's the police. And Cleo and Grandma, they panic like, oh shit! And they jump in their car and they speed away. But they leave 17 there underneath the bridge. And so then 17 freaks out and he runs off too, into the woods. And police, they see James's body hanging there from the bridge. And they're like, what the fuck? What kind of hillbilly West Virginia bullshit is this? But anyway, police eventually find 17 in the woods and bam, they arrest him. Also, bam, they arrest Cleo. While Grandma ends up turning herself in. And so ultimately, Cleo is found guilty of disinterment of a body and she ends up serving about 2 years in prison. While 17 does a little time in juvenile detention, but not very much. While Grandma takes a plea deal, but I guess the judge feels sorry for her because, you know, the whole self-defense of it all, and she only ends up spending 55 days in jail. Wow. So this famous doctor is a fraud. Let me explain. Now, the story starts with this woman, Benita. And Benita is a TV producer living in New York City. And one day in 2013, she's assigned to work on a documentary story about this amazing rock star of a surgeon, this guy, Dr. Paulo. And Dr. Paulo is a guy who's so brilliant, he invented a life-saving surgery that gives people with broken windpipes the chance to breathe again. And so he's like famous in the medical world now. So Benita meets this guy to do this story on him and interview him, and she's like, oh snap, he kind of fine. And then boom, they start dating. And this is going really well for her. Dr. Paulo's nice, he treats her good, he's successful, and he's respected in the medical community. And together they seem really happy. But Dr. Paulo is gone all the time for work. He apparently has to fly all over the world to do these breakthrough surgeries. But, you know, that's okay. He's always sending Benita little love messages and stuff.
Just wanted to send you a few loving good morning words and a lot of kisses.
And after several months of dating, pow, he proposes. So now these two are officially getting married. But there's a small problem. Dr. Paulo is already married to another woman. I mean, they're not together anymore, but his divorce isn't quite finalized yet. But whatever, they'll figure it out. So anyway, they start planning this wedding, and it's going to be a big destination wedding in Italy. Not only that, but Dr. Paulo is like famous in the medical world, so he knows a lot of people. He says he's friends with the Clintons, so he's going to invite them to the wedding. He's friends with the Obamas, so they're invited. He knows Vladimir Putin, so he's invited. French leader Nicolas Sarkozy is also going to be there. The Beckhams, Elton John, Russell Crowe, they're all going to be there. Not only that, John Legend is going to be playing the ceremony. And if that isn't crazy enough, bro is also friends with the Pope. And so Dr. Paulo tells Benita that the Pope has offered to marry them himself in his papal palace in Italy. And Dr. Paulo even secures a castle for all their guests to stay in.
Isn't it incredible that next week we are to visit the place where we will marry?
And so this is going to be like an amazing wedding. And so fast forward a little bit to 2014. And they haven't had their wedding yet, but they're a few months away from it and things are still going well. But then it all starts crashing down. Because one day she's reading the New York Times and boom, she sees a story about Dr. Paulo. Apparently some of his colleagues in the medical community are accusing him of scientific misconduct, saying that he's exaggerating the success of these life-saving windpipe surgeries he's so well known for. And so she goes to him and she's like, what's all this about? And he tries to play it off like, oh, none of that is true. They're just haters, or whatever he says. So anyway, some more time passes and their wedding date is getting closer. Now, after this wedding, Benita is supposed to move to Barcelona where Dr. Paulo has a house. And she's going to live there with him and it's going to be wonderful. And so she gets her passport all ready. She quits her job for this move. She is now ready for this new life with her dream man in Spain. So one day, she's chilling at a spa, looking at her phone, and she gets an email from someone she knows. And this person sent her a link to an article that shows that the Pope is not going to be in Italy around the time of her wedding. He's scheduled to be in South America, so he can't possibly marry them. And so she calls Dr. Paulo and she's like yelling at him like, what the fuck is going on? You lying to me? And Dr. Paulo makes up some bullshit excuses and he says, I'll fly to Rome and I'll fix this myself. But Benita, she's not stupid. She knows something weird is going on. And so she uses her TV documentary producer skills and she starts investigating. She calls the castle that Dr. Paulo said the wedding guests are supposed to stay at, and the people at the castle say they've never heard of him. Not only that, other places he claimed he booked for the wedding also never heard of him. So immediately, Benita does the smart thing and she postpones the wedding until she can figure out what the hell is going on. And so like 300 guests who all bought plane tickets to Italy now have to ask for a refund. Wow, that sucks. But anyway, she looks into all of this, and she gets someone who's affiliated with the Clintons to confirm that they've never heard of Dr. Paulo either. Then she somehow gets the Vatican to verify that the Pope also doesn't know Dr. Paulo. So this dude was just like lying, saying he knows all these people and has all these famous friends when like, no, he doesn't at all. And so Benita's like, oh, hell no. And she travels to Barcelona to his house to surprise confront him. And she gets there and she learns that he's living there in Barcelona with another woman. Not his wife that he was supposed to be getting a divorce from, but a third woman that he apparently has a serious relationship with. Okay, so we know that he's a liar, but who really is this Dr. Paulo guy? Well, he really is a world-renowned surgeon, and he really did invent a breakthrough windpipe surgery. And for him, this is like a really big deal because it makes him very well known in the medical community, and then he gets recruited for a job at a respected medical research university in Sweden, and because the science behind this surgery is brand new, Dr. Paulo is supposed to do a lot of preparation and tests to make sure it's not too risky. However, he doesn't do all that. No. He dives right into operating on people. And these surgeries, they seem to be successful, and the patients go through it, and they feel better, and they recover. However, then, a little later, some of them start dying from complications from his surgeries. And some of them who don't die, they have strokes and they start going blind, and one person needed almost 200 additional surgeries to try and fix the damage from his work. Like all kinds of horrible stuff. Because his breakthrough windpipe surgery wasn't breakthrough at all. It was total bullshit. And so it's during this time that he meets Benita, who's trying to interview him for a TV documentary she's producing, and he's successful and he's moderately famous in his community, but for whatever sociopathic reason, he starts lying to her. Not only about being single, but he starts saying he's friends with the Obamas and with Elton John, and that he personally knows the Pope, and all this other nonsense. Now, eventually, over time, as Dr. Paulo gets more and more well-known, other doctors and surgeons and medical professors, they look into his work and they start declaring it to be junk science and dangerous. And they start calling him out, calling him a fraud, and calling out the medical research university in Sweden that employs him. Even Benita, after she discovers he's a liar, she eventually starts writing to the medical research university in Sweden, telling them that Dr. Paulo is in fact a fraud. And so the medical research university in Sweden has to do an investigation, and they look into him several times actually, and they eventually discover that, yeah, he's a bullshitter. He had lied on his resume, and he had said that his surgeries were way more successful than they actually were, and a lot of people he operated on got hurt because of it. And so, eventually, the Medical Research University in Sweden fires him for scientific misconduct. And in 2016, Swedish police open a criminal investigation into him. And ultimately, in 2023, he's found guilty of gross assault against his patients. Imagine your surgery is so bad that you're charged with committing assault. Anyway, this lion-ass dude, he gets sentenced to 2 years, 6 months in prison.